I request our chairs to be seated and to also introduce our speakers for this plenary session. Thank you.
So we are beginning the second day with philosophy, ethics and morality, human dignity and inclusiveness from human health to planetary health. One of the big discussions will be on dignity. What is dignity? From classical Greek philosophy to Hinduism's concept of Atman, from Christianity's doctrine of Imago Dei and the Enlightenment thinkers, the notion of human dignity has crystallized through the centuries. It is particularly in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the foundational principle is human dignity. Immanuel Kant would say that because we are autonomous beings, we are capable of self-determination, that we have dignity. We can never be used as a means to an end, but we are an end in ourselves. As we explore this session, how dignity can serve as a foundational principle for promoting human and planetary health in an inclusive and globalized world, we are honored to bring three speakers. Professor Heng Ten Have will reflect on dignity as the ethical cornerstone in global bioethics, and then Monsignor Renzo will speak about the perspective of inclusiveness in public health, One Health, and Father Charles Davis will broaden our perspective by exploring the concept of dignity in world religions. So we have a feast ahead of us, and I ask my co-chair to please introduce the first speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome once again. Thanks to the organizers for this wonderful opportunity given to us to chair the session. Human dignity is non-negotiable in ethics, and we have a very renowned professor, Dr. Heng Ten Have, who has studied medicine and philosophy and worked in the universities in Netherlands as director of Division of Ethics and Science and Technology of UNESCO in Paris, France, and as a professor of healthcare ethics in the Center for Healthcare Ethics at Duquesne University, Pittsburgh, USA. Since 2021, he is a research professor at the Faculty of Bioethics in Mexico. His latest books are Bioethics, Healthcare and the Soul in 2022, Msgr Bioethics, Ghosts, Monsters and Pilgrims again 2022, the COVID-19 Pandemic and Global Bioethics 2022. His most recent publication is Color, Healthcare and Bioethics, that is in 2025. We are truly honored to welcome you, Professor Heng Ten Have, to take on the session.
It's a pleasure to talk about the topic of human dignity in the framework of global bioethics. Now, what I will do is, first of all, explain this framework, because it is interesting to note that during the development of ethics in the context of healthcare, we can see that there is a specific evolution. You can argue that ethical reflection has always been a component of healthcare and medicine. And in that sense, you can say medical ethics is a very old discipline in almost all cultures and continents, and it has specific characteristics that are important. But what we notice is that in the 70s, almost more than 50 years ago, there was a new development from medical ethics into bioethics. And that is important to note, because when we look at medical ethics, it is primarily the business of medical professionals. They are the experts. They make the decisions, and they determine what are the relevant values in the context of healthcare. If we move, and that is the move that we are noticing in the 70s, towards bioethics, it is a broader concept. Not only medical experts are involved, it is essentially the business, ethics is the business of everybody involved in healthcare, patients, also philosophers, theologians, and all other experts. And the focus is also broader than in medical ethics, where the patient was the major concern. In bioethics, we see that the patient is also important, but also the context of healthcare, the living conditions of the patient, the medical system, health insurance system, for example. So it is a broader concept in a sense that more actors are involved and more issues are at the table of ethical reflection. Now that new discipline of bioethics has prospered very well in most countries over the last 50 years. What we notice is that since the turn of the millennium, there's also a new movement in the evolution of ethical reflection, and that is a movement from bioethics to global bioethics. And that has to do with the increasing internationalization of medical research, for example, where clinical trials are no longer primarily performed in Western countries, but for example, more and more also in your country, in developing countries, and that brings also new issues of concern. So this move from bioethics to global bioethics, on the one hand, also expands the number of issues that are on the table as ethically relevant. For example, due to globalization, we have more awareness of the general vulnerability of populations, the inequalities that exist in countries and between countries, but also negative aspects of globalization, such as the trade of organs, health tourism, all those phenomena that are the consequence of increasing globalization of the planet. Now, in this evolutionary scheme with 3 steps in the evolution of ethical thinking in healthcare, we can also notice that there are specific ethical issues associated with each stage. For example, for medical ethics, it has long been assumed that there were some founding fathers, like Hippocrates, and he has formulated what are the basic ethical principles for medical ethics. Now, in the new stage of bioethics, we have also a kind of canonical text, which is the textbook of Beecham and Childers, with the principles of biomedical ethics. It is a book that is used in many teaching programs in many countries, and that formulates a set of 4 principles that are important to consider in your ethical reflections: autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Now, if we move to the 3rd stage of this evolution, global bioethics, there also is a canonical text, and that is the Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights that has been adopted by the member states of UNESCO 20 years ago now. Now, this Universal Declaration, let's say, is the result of a long-term negotiation between representatives of all the member states of UNESCO. And I remember quite well that, for example, the delegation of your country, India, has played a major role in the debate by bringing issues on the table that are relevant from the perspective of developing countries. I can say most of the concerns in ethics are usually determined by the perspective of the richer countries in the West. But for developing countries, there are other issues at stake and other ethical reflections. And those were brought on the table by your ambassador in UNESCO. Now, this declaration was adopted, as I said, 10 years ago, unanimously by all the member states of UNESCO, and it is the first and only international document in the field of bioethics that is adopted by governments, and that makes it an important document. There are other prestigious documents that you know, like the Helsinki Declaration, that is also an international document, but it has not been adopted by governments. It has been adopted by medical professional organizations. So this is a commitment of governments to a set of basic principles that should govern healthcare and medicine. it is what lawyers would argue, it is soft law. It is legally not formally binding, but it's a legal commitment. If you have adopted this declaration as a government, you have committed yourself to the importance of the principles in the document. And that makes it an important statement. Now, if we look at the content, then we can see that it presents a broader ethical framework. If you remember the framework of bioethics with the 4 principles, as advocated by Beecham and Silder, you see here 15 basic principles, and it is argued that there is no hierarchy among the principles, that they're all equally important. You can see that they are ordered in a specific way, and that is also significant, because the first principle here is human dignity. And as the chair was arguing, that is of course also because there is another document, the Human Rights Declaration, that is also very basic, and that is the basic document also for the bioethics document. So human dignity is the cornerstone, the stepping stone of the other principles. And then you will recognize some of the principles of Beecham and Childers, benefit and harm, autonomy. But then gradually you notice that the perspective is broadening from the perspective of the individual person with autonomy, beneficence, to the perspective of the community, to the perspective of society, and then the perspective of the planet as a whole. It is moving towards a very broad perspective where in the end concern with the survival of the planet is also an important consideration for bioethics. So what you can see here is reflected is that the global bioethics framework has 3 major concerns. It's concerned with the individual interest, the patient and the individual person, but it's also concerned with social interest, the community, justice, solidarity, inequality, and concerns with the environment, the future generations concern, and the concern with biodiversity is also part of the bioethical framework. So it has broadened the domain of bioethics, including also social and environmental issues. Now, if we look at specifically at the first principle of human dignity and human rights, this is the formulation. And you can say, well, there's a very general formulation which is specific for this kind of documents. As soon as you start to ask for a definition, what is human dignity, you know that there will be problem. There will be disagreement. Countries will not agree on a definition, but they can agree about the importance of the principle. And there are more important notions that are very difficult to define, but we can still work with them. So human dignity should be respected, okay? But then the second is also interesting because that is more specific. It states that the interest of the individual should have priority over the interest of science and society. And that is also what is formulated in the Declaration of Helsinki. And the background here is very clear. This was formulated against the background of the Second World War and the Cold War. Because in the Second World War, in some countries like Germany, individuals were sacrificed for the sake of society and for the sake of science. And in the Soviet Union at that time, also society was more important than the individual. And here it states that the primary concern is the individual. Social and scientific concerns are important, but they can never override the individual interest. And that's an important statement reflecting at least some feelings about what this notion of dignity would imply. But there is no definition. It doesn't mean that in the bioethical debate there has not been a lot of reflection on human dignity. And as we know, human dignity is primarily interpreted as a theoretical notion. And I assume that Father Charles will further elaborate on that, it is the idea that every human being has equal worth and has accompanying rights. So human rights are based on the idea that every human being is equally worthy. And it is important to also to be aware in the context of UNESCO as a world organization that human dignity and human rights are not Western ideas. Sometimes it is argued that it's a Western invention, but the West cannot claim that it has invented these notions because they were already formulated long before the advent of Christianity. In your own culture, in China, in classical Greece, there were formulations that were hinting at the idea of human dignity and human rights. So it has a much longer history, going back to several hundred years before the birth of Christ, that are important to consider. So it is unfair if it's claimed that this is a Western invention. It's not. And one of the philosophers that has done a lot of work in this respect is the German philosopher Hans Joas, not Hans Jonas, but Hans Joas. And he has several books written about the idea that the history of human dignity and human rights goes back to the first notions that human beings are sacred individuals. And that's a very much older idea than Western civilization. But of course you can argue that in Western civilization this notion of dignity has gone through several stages. In the Greek antiquity it was more a moral quality that you have dignity. And then he has several notions of dignity that will be hopefully elaborated somewhat later. So our notion of dignity has an old tradition, but of course there are very different interpretations of the notion in a theoretical realm. That's the theoretical dimension of the notion of dignity. But I would also argue that human dignity is not only an abstract and theoretical notion. It's a value, of course, but it's also a practical issue. It's a performative issue. If we use the notion, we want to do something with the notion. And it is, in a sense, if we talk about human dignity, also a lived experience that we can feel whether human dignity is respected or not, that our own dignity is respected or not. So it's a value, but it's also kind of experience that everyone has. And in that sense, it's a relational quality. It depends how other people around us are responding to us, are respecting our dignity, and give us input that we can feel as respect of our dignity. It is related to how we treat human beings, not only ourselves, but also other people. And that reflects to an important notion in ethics. Sometimes it's argued that philosophy and ethics is starting with wondering. We are amazed about how things are. But other people, and I'm inclined to that point of view, I say, well, ethics usually starts with indignation. We feel that certain situations cannot be accepted, and they make us angry. They make us feel outraged that these conditions exist, and there are clear violations of this theoretical notion of human dignity that we recognize as exploitation, injustices, disrespect, humiliation. So there are all kinds of manifestations of indignity that are the starting point for ethical reflection and ethical action. And that is based on the notion that we are not only individuals, and human dignity is an individual characteristic, but not only an individual characteristic, because we are part of a community related to other people, and that brings that we share certain needs, that we share certain vulnerabilities, and that we should take into account these vulnerabilities. And that means that we are respecting vulnerability in a more practical sense. Now, the question is, what are the conditions in which vulnerability can flourish, in which indignities will disappear or diminish. And I think we should also, if we talk about human dignity, take into account the question, what are the conditions in which human dignity can really be respected? So I would argue human dignity is a social practice that is also important to consider because it makes human life more humane. And in that sense, let's say human dignity is not a grand, what they could call nowadays in philosophy, grand narrative. It can be, it's a theoretical notion, so we can make a grand narrative. But in practice, it is a thousand humble stories of people who try to go against the threat of indignity, who try to make people feel respected, not humiliated, not exploited. And they do that in their daily practice, in their daily work. And they have no great stories to tell, but they are moral examples of how to work with human dignity in a practical setting. One of the examples is a book written by Payam Akravan, he was from Iran, and he was a refugee in the United States, and he became an international lawyer working with the International Criminal Court. And he was involved in many cases of clear injustice, cruelty, violence, violations of human dignity on a grand scale in many countries. And he was motivated in the pursuit of global justice, not because of the bigger principles of this theoretical framework, but because he was confronted with individual suffering of people. He went to the country, spoke to the people who were persecuted, who were violated, who were refugees in horrible circumstances. And he saw their suffering, and that was motivating him to do his work for global justice. So it's not that we go from a theoretical principle to practice, but we go from a practice that is clearly illustrating indignities to a more higher ethical level justifying our activities. So this is an important lesson, I think, from reflection on human dignity. And I think it's also illustrated in this painting of the painter Vincent van Gogh, the Good Samaritan. So this is what illustrates, in my view, what human dignity means in practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Hengten Have, for that powerful reflection on human dignity in general framework of global bioethics. He also explained on how bioethics evolved to global bioethics, and he has also given us a bird's eye view of the Universal Declaration of Bioethics and Human Rights. Also reminding us on our responsibility to ensure future generation inherit a livable world, and human beings are sacred and every human being has equal worth. Human dignity is not just abstract, but a kind of experience how other people around us influence our perception on human dignity. Professor also stressed on the importance of respect for other individuals. I think it was a very engaging session and very powerful reflection. I hand over to Father Christopher.
Yes, thank you. I just want to make 2 points. One is that as part of attending this international conference on education and ethics, I think some of the teachers of ethics can consider moving away from the American or the Georgetown mantra to the UNESCO 15 principles in teaching ethics to your students in medical schools. And it's an important learning that we can take. There's a lot of argument that there is ethical incommensurability with just the 4 principles of the American mantra. Second point I would like to quickly make is that the recent, Bush recently died. So that's also a kind of hint that we are moving ahead and that we are being alive anew. And then there's a document, a recent Vatican document, which pointed out abuses against dignity, and that kind of coincides with what you were speaking about, knowing about dignity from the abuses of dignity. Okay, thank you very much for that. And I now want to introduce our next speaker, Monsignor Renzo Pegoraro, graduate in medicine and surgery at the University of Padua. Today we celebrate the saint of Padua, the local saint, Saint Anthony, a very famous saint. He also holds an MD in medicine. He was ordained a priest for the Diocese of Padua, and he studied theology and philosophy and holds a post-graduation in moral theology and an advanced course and diploma in bioethics. He was a professor of bioethics from 1993 at the faculty in northern Italy, and then general secretary of the Foundation Lanzia, a center for advanced studies in ethics, bioethics, and environmental ethics. He's a member of the European Society for Philosophy and Medicine and Healthcare, and president of the same association since 2005 to 2007. From 2003, he's teaching nursing ethics as a professor in Bambino Gesù Children's Hospital, and from 2010 to 2013, European Association of Center for Medical Ethics, and as president of the same association. He's also a member of the IAEE. Since 2011, he was the Chancellor of the Pontifical Academy for Life. That's one of the Vatican departments. And on May 27th, very recently, Pope Leo XIV has appointed him as President of the Pontifical Academy of Life. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Monsignor Renzo Pegoraro.
Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity following the presentation by Tenave. And so it is very important, the concept and the practical consequence of human dignity. And I try to include this perspective in our understanding of the world today, which kind of approach to the entire world, and in which way we are able to have a new awareness, a new consciousness, and new responsibilities in this context. So a cosmological, anthropological shift from a classical physics to the ecological cosmos, from a static, inert, rotating masses connected by the force of gravity to entities with multiple forms of agency. So not only inert matter, but interrelated life forms. That is a new view, new interpretation, and for this reason, new responsibilities. And so from ecological cosmos to one health. So the concept also of health is changing. One Health approach emphasizes the environmental dimension, biodiversity, and interdependence global of multiple life forms and ecological factors that enable their balanced development. So this strong interdependence of all living forms, organisms, and this ecological view of our world. And so integrated view of human, animal, and environmental health. In fact, also human life is incomprehensible and unsustainable without other creature. So it is very important and crucial, and with special dignity, human being, a human person, but we needed to integrate the relations with all other living forms and the context of our life. So I emphasize this approach of biodiversity and interdependence. An example is the Amazon biome in Querida, Amazonia, when there is a special view of that land, the interconnection of all living organisms, and a special idea of a unity of all living forms in that place. So the human position in the cosmos. And we can elaborate a situated anthropocentrism. So we recognize the spatial identity and of human being, but in the context and in this interrelation, interdependence with other living organisms. That was an approach stressed by Pope Francis in Laudato Si and Laudate Deum, with this idea of universal family, a sublime communion that impels us to a sacred, loving and humble respect. So we start with the idea of this recognition and this respect, and this approach of inclusiveness. So all living organisms are included, and all factors that are relevant in the idea of a universal family. But of course, in this perspective, in this approach, a specific human capacity for responsible action in natural system. So in which way to develop this human responsibility. And so a new way to understand health, and we move in the direction of global health, where all organisms are included, and there is ecological, animal and human health that are integrated in this view. What kind of health do we want and can sustain? Health as a shared responsibility. So One Health and public health. So the idea of One Health is a concept introduced by the WHO in the early 2000s, basis for a global, multidisciplinary and integrated approach to health issues. And that is a practical development, also the idea of inclusiveness. So all are factors, all determinants, all living organisms, and all human beings are involved in this idea of One Health. Health integrated into all policies, because when we speak of global health, One Health, it is that transportation, housing, agriculture, all social, economic and political aspects are relevant to define the idea of health. And more health in policies implies more policy in health. So there is the issue of how a global healthcare system is both more ecological and more humane. So this perspective creates a positive integration of the so-called ecological aspect and the human aspect. And so we are able to elaborate a specific responsibility and to implies this more policy in health, because we need new action, new integrated action in this perspective of One Health and public health. And a specific role is also the prevention, that could be more relevant, because after the experience of the pandemic of COVID-19, in which way we are able to enter in this perspective of global public health and the perspective of prevention of some disease or some pandemics, because it's very complicated with a lot of disaster when we intervene after the development of a pandemic. So we recognize new risk factors from environment and lifestyle, in which way we could change some lifestyle and which kind of responsibilities concern our lifestyle in this context, in the idea of environmental, ecological context, and which kind of action that we can have in front of the environmental questions. And so we recognize the biological mechanism: oxidative stress, chronic inflammation, endocrine imbalance, microbiota, epigenetics, all mechanisms that are relevant for our health, and in which way human health, and in which way we could include these factors, this aspect, in the idea of health, and which kind of action by healthcare system to concern this kind of prevention. And the environmental impact of health system. Now there is also a recent discussion that also in healthcare system there are some consequences for the environment, and in which way to become more sustainable in our healthcare system. So healthcare system generates about 80% of GHG, greenhouse emission in the West. And digital device save travel, and we have save time, especially using all digital issue, and the use of artificial intelligence. We know that is very useful in many cases, but probably not many know that also artificial intelligence consume a lot of energy, and we need to produce a lot of energy to maintain the system of artificial intelligence. So, in which way to be also more informed and more aware, also that we need to spend resources and money in healthcare. That is positive. It is positive to prevent some disease, so we avoid some cost and some consequence, but also in which way also healthcare system is part of the One Health, of the global health, and this idea of family, all including all human beings, of course, but also all living organisms, part of this big family in our cosmos that is an ecological cosmos. So short and simple conclusion about a big issue, because of course when we enter in this perspective and we try to have an idea of a global health, One Health, and global responsibilities, so we need for a global healthcare model more ecological and more humane. So we need to rethink some our experiences, and the model that was developed the last 50 years, we need to change something to have a system that is more sustainable and that is able to manage the resources, ecological resources, economical, social, human resources in a better way, to guarantee a good level of care and care to all human beings, but in this perspective that the human beings are not isolated in the world, but they are part of the world. Rebuilding trust in science and professional. That is still, and now probably, a problem, especially after the experience of COVID-19. What is the role of science? Sometimes it became a kind of strong power able to explain and to resolve all problems. Science must be a little more humble. That is an interpretation of many aspects, is a try to find some solution, but is not God or is able to resolve all aspects. But in the same time, we recognize the role of science, because sometimes there is a movement anti-scientific approach that try to find other solution of the problems. So in which way to understand science and in which way science is relevant in our problem. And the same is about the professionals, in which way we recognize the competence, the expertise of doctors, nurses, and all people involved in the healthcare system. And we recognize a specific competence and the contribution that they give, and respect his or her professional approach. Health is a collective and interconnected construct that we need to change, as I told at the beginning, our approach, and to have more awareness of this interconnection. We save each other together as human beings and all living organisms. That was a strong message by Pope Francis, and we try to enter in this approach, and in which way we can contribute and work together with this idea of One Health, inclusiveness, and global responsibilities of everyone.
Thank you, Monsignor Renzo. You have further broadened the horizon to a global healthcare system, talking about determinants to health and also about our common bond of humanity, the brotherhood and sisterhood of the human race. Thank you very much. I hand over to my co-chair.
Having listened to the insights from the previous speaker on the ethical fabric which connects human health with ecological view of health, now we have our next speaker, Reverend Dr. Charles Davis, who will now deliberate on understanding human dignity in world religions. And Reverend Dr. Father Charles is a priest of the Diocese of Jammu Srinagar. He is a renowned expert in moral theology and bioethics. He holds a doctorate in theology from St. George, Frankfurt, and completed his habilitation in bioethics at the University from Germany. He currently serves as a professor of moral theology and bioethics at the Albert Ludwig University. Father Charles served also as the Associate Director of our Medical College in St. John's National Academy of Health Sciences. He is a member of the Pontifical Academy for Life, Vatican. His international experience includes pastoral service in Germany, academic role in Pune and Frankfurt, and active contribution to the global bioethics education. Reverend Father, it's my honor to invite you to talk on the human dignity in world religions.
I thank Professor Hengton Harvey for enlightening us on the importance of human dignity and human rights, for the general ethical framework of global bioethics, as well as Msgr Renzo for giving us the perspectives of inclusiveness and One Health for global bioethics. I'm basically going to present the understanding of human dignity in world religions in building global bioethics. Global bioethics, through these foundational principles of human dignity, justice and solidarity, can guide decisions to sustain human health and the planetary health. And the world religions can play a crucial and significant role in establishing the global bioethics. For the largest number of the world population, representing 83.6%, has some sort of affiliation to world religions. The religious idea of human dignity explains not only the rights of the human individuals and societies, but also reminds fellow humans of their benevolent duties towards the other. especially the most vulnerable. Religions have a stronger appeal to their followers. The similar religious idea of human dignity can address not only the bioethical questions at the global stage, but also social issues in multicultural and multi-religious contexts. Judaism, Catholicism, Protestantism, and Orthodox Christianity identify human dignity with the image and likeness of God. And this is the most fundamental justification for the influential idea of human dignity, which every human being is born with. Islam teaches us natural dignity as well as a higher moral dignity. According to Islam, the natural dignity is not restricted to Muslims alone, though the submission to the will of Allah would enhance the moral dignity of humans. In Hinduism, the concept of dignity of salvation is possible only in human life and is available to all regardless of their caste, gender, or social status. However, the prevalent caste system indicates a graded social status. In order to promote global bioethics and human rights, we need to rethink in absolutizing social statuses. Sikhism was a crusade against the caste system. The rights and duties are the same for all men and all women in Sikhism. Respect for all life and avoidance of all injury to life plays an important role in Jaina ethics. In Jainism and Buddhism, the liberated persons are considered dignified and virtuous. In Confucian human dignity lies the human conduct centered on benevolence, righteousness, ritual, wisdom, and integrity. The Confucian benevolence and the Msgr righteousness are superior to life itself. This is some sort of moral dignity. That means they give importance to moral dignity. Taoism, on the other hand, does not restrict dignity to humans alone, but has significant insights in the protection of animals and ecology. It is similar to Swiss bioethics, which speaks of dignity of living creatures, which both the previous speakers have emphasized that today we need to speak about the ecological and planetary health. And the Zoroastrian bioethics consists in doing good. The Parsis, the Zoroastrians in India are known for their charitable activities, and they stress more upon the moral dignity. And the Baha'i ethics believes in the idea of inherent dignity irrespective of the moral values, and every human being is born with this intrinsic dignity, and also they consider humanity to be the crown of creation with a superior value above all other creatures. Now I gave a little broad view about different religions, what they speak. I was trying to communicate to you that religions speak generally about two kinds of dignities: intrinsic natural human dignity and the moral dignity. And what we are actually interested in bioethics is the natural human dignity beyond religions and regions. Religions generally teach these two kinds of human dignity: the inherent natural human dignity and the other attainable moral dignity. Inherent dignity is inalienable and inseparable from the human condition. That means when you are born as a human being, you have this value within you. Whereas the moral dignity is an honor of a religious attainment like salvation, a moral fulfillment, a personal accomplishment, or an achievement of a social status that one can gain and lose. You may lose your moral dignity, you may lose your social dignity, but you never lose your inherent natural dignity. That is why, while inherent natural dignity is intrinsic to human existence, moral dignity depends on a moral, good human life, ensuring the path to salvation. Mostly, religious beliefs and practices help humans attain this moral dignity. From the perspectives of creation and philosophy, we understand this human dignity refers to the natural worth of human individual and of the entire humanity as a species, whereas most religions emphasize on the moral dignity in addition to the acceptance of the natural human dignity. Religions want humans to rise above animal nature in them and aspire divine values in order to improve their rational moral qualities. The importance is put on the moral aspiration. Therefore, moral behavior is expected in religions in order to attain nirvana or liberation or salvation is nothing but actually an expectation of the natural human dignity that we have in us. Therefore, respect for humans is a demand of natural human dignity itself, and not because of an achieved dignified social status. Religions tend to call a morally good person dignified, and practices of moral dignity for salvation may be unique to different religions, but natural human dignity exists even prior to religions. While moral dignity could be foundational to individual behaviors and social ethics, natural human dignity is sufficient and foundational to bioethics. Moral dignity is aspirational and dependent on our moral behavior. Natural dignity is inalienable and inviolable and inseparable from the human condition. What we are therefore interested in global bioethics is the natural inherent dignity. None of the religions explicitly deny this natural human dignity. They hold humans high above other animals on account of this natural dignity. Images of God, Atman is Brahman, Tattvam Asi, are the few images used by various religions to highlight the special creation of humans with rights and duties. Natural dignity as the intrinsic worth of human being is present in every human being at all times from the moment of conception to natural death. There is not even a single human being without this natural human dignity. All humans are born free and with equal dignity. These intrinsic qualities of rationality, freedom, morality, and the inherent values of dignity, equality are inseparable, therefore, from the human condition. It is absolutely certain that the past generations and the future generations of humanity will have these fundamental qualities and values. In comparison to non-human animals, only humanity has this special and unique value of dignity. This superior natural human dignity has its ground on the combined intrinsic qualities of rationality, freedom, and morality that signify humans unique and special. Natural human dignity is intrinsic without attribution. We are not attributing by the society. All that the natural dignity needs, requires, and demands is its recognition by other individuals, the society, and the state. Some religions acknowledge that this natural dignity has been conferred by God, and that is why we are created such way. So, basing on moral dignity, some consider, please note, basing on moral dignity, some consider that an undignified life is not worth living, and they communicate this moral dignity to decision making, sometimes false decision. This is one of the most confusing cultural, philosophical, or religious statements that can mislead the people to eliminate a terminally ill patient or terminate the wrongdoers. Humans need compassion and correction and not elimination. Sickness does not take away the natural dignity. Criminals do not lose their natural dignity. Wrongdoers can be taught, restricted and penalized with deterrent punishment without violating their inherent natural human dignity. Cultural diversities do not deny the universality and transnationality of the natural human dignity, and that is why we speak of one human health and one planetary health. The ethics education for future generations depends on the recognition of this inherent natural dignity. Global bioethics possible only with this recognition of the natural human dignity and universal human rights. It can play as an ultimate rationality to protect individual humans and the last barrier against genetic clonings and germline alternations of the basic characteristics of the human species. I'd like to conclude saying human dignity is the mother principle of all extended principles of the right to life, non-maleficence, beneficence, autonomy, justice, physical and mental integrity and vulnerability. Beyond all the rhetoric surrounding it, human dignity can express the real concern and the need for the respect and protection of every single human being and the entire humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Father Charles, for that well-articulated and a thought-provoking session. Father has very clearly reminded us on the role of various religions and its teachings to establish the bioethics. Also, he reminded us saying the importance of natural human dignity as a foundation for the bioethics and the unique strength of human beings. Thank you, Father, for that very enlightening session.
We have very little time left, so because we also began late, so we can allow 3 questions maybe. So may anybody wants to ask a question?
Maybe you remember the article of Ruth Macklin 20 years ago in the British Medical Journal, telling that dignity is a useless concept. I would like to know if this was an isolated statement, or if you think that there are other academics that are going against the dignity as a solid concept for bioethics. And the other question should be how can we manage this inherent the concept of dignity, of human dignity, when many other people are using this same concept just to argue for euthanasia and for other acts against human life. Thank you.
Professor Ten, how would you like to take that question first and then?
You were right that the article of Bruce Macklin at the time was an important statement, but at the same time it illustrated one of the biases in Western bioethics. One of the reasons why in UNESCO context it was argued that we need a global perspective, because dignity is not the same as autonomy. On the other hand, you can argue that dignity is perhaps the basis for respect for autonomy. So it's not that you can regard these concepts as, let's say, as equivalent, but dignity refers to something that is going beyond the idea of an individual that is self-determining. In the context of UNESCO, that was one argument to say, well, we should try to indicate what else is important for a society to identify its ethical priorities. And I'm not sure whether the article was important, but I'm not sure whether it has a lot of followers. it has a lot of followers in the sense that you have maybe some liberal tendencies in Western bioethics that think that autonomy is the primary bioethical issue. Well, I think most of the people in European bioethics, especially in the southern countries, they think, well, autonomy is one, but we also have to take into account justice issues. We have to take into account benevolence, not in this old framework. So it's not that autonomy is necessarily the dominant principle.
And just because 7 years ago here in this place there was the conference of International Association of Bioethics here in this St. John College, and there was a debate between Ruth McLean and Soren Holm about this question, and Soren insisted about the idea that dignity is something that is more universal, and including also the guarantee of respect for more vulnerable, disabled people, other people that they have not a strong idea of autonomy. And Ruth McLean at the end said, but probably you are right. It was interesting because the debate was here, and with an idea that it's possible to understand better the idea of autonomy, but in the context of this idea that the basic is the human dignity.
Yes, it underscores all the more the reason for moving away from this American mantra that I say, because it was a response to all the abuses during the World War, and autonomy was overemphasized. Father Charles will go to the next question. Please. From Yanipoya, I don't know your name, please.
Dr. Veena.
Dr. Veena from Yanipoya. Please give her a mic. Okay. We'll take those two questions together and then we will answer. Please go ahead.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. The question is to Monsignor Renzo. One global healthcare model. I know we were talking about this pre-COVID, then post-COVID it took a nosedive and it seems to be a bit buried. I say this in context of ASEAN. If you're familiar with the acronym, the Association of the Southeast Asian Countries. We were talking about it, keyword, talking about it. We actually sort of had a draft plan. Now, post-COVID, in the light of global economics, increase of nationalism in my set of countries, where do we start? I mean, that conversation has not started again. I mean, it's not in anyone's priority. It's so low down the totem pole. I don't think it'll need to get resurrected. No one has seen salvation there yet. So, where do we start?
Yeah, this is regarding the dignity per se, when I have also had discussions with Dr. Ruth McLean and my PhD professor, Bert, who was my supervisors here. Dignity is not a content that is empty, but a lot of it also has to be filled through our profession. How the dignity is and how do we interpret it? For me, for forensic aspect, because this is the first study in qualitative research on respect for dead in disasters, because we think that the respect for us is a humanitarian way of doing forensic. That means how we consider the relatives of the dead and the body, how we handle. So each of us in our profession has to look at the dignity, because we have lost a lot in translation of dignity when it comes to our profession. We look at the regular religious text and say, okay, this is not applicable to us. It is applicable, but you make it workable with praxis. There is value, but what is lacking is praxis from our own professions. So it's up to us to feel it and to show how dignity can be worked out. In forensic, we have done it through humanitarian forensics, where we try to listen to the wishes of the deceased through the relatives. What did they want with the body, how to preserve the body, how to dignify the body, how to handle it in a way we can return it to the relatives without them feeling much and more grief by our actions. So I think it's for all of us to do that kind of exercise model. Thank you.
Many thanks for the question. It is a very
urgent but also very complicated to understand in which direction to restart or start in this moment of many crises. We call polycrisis in the world, environmental crisis, political crisis, economical crisis, and also moral crisis. And so in which way we are able to rethink an idea of universal fraternity, brotherhood, not only competition, nationalism, and so on, and in which way we are able to involve all people in this process of the idea of One Health and global cooperation of this. So we need also to rethink the idea of globalization that was more economical aspect, but to understand the idea of universal fraternity, human rights, dignity, and the strong idea of cooperation. Interaction is connected with cooperation, not only competition.
Charles, would you like to take the last question? Yeah.
May I just add to the discussion? I think the Catholic Church as an organization has probably runs the largest network of healthcare across this globe. Is there any institutional practices that can be implemented in our hospital network to systematically promote the dignity of patient care? Has that come out across from the leaders of the church of what healthcare, Catholic healthcare across the world, in Africa and in India, for example, because that's my experience been, nursing doctors, rich patients, poor patients, high-tech robotics versus having simple things available, the poor and the rich, and of course the ability to balance sustainability with our delivery. So I think it's important that the Catholic Church bring out some sort of guidelines for each individual hospital or Catholic doctor to be able to systematically include human dignity within our systems.
Thank you. No more questions. That will be the last question. Charles, you can take that first.
Yeah, what Dr. Sanjeev has said is a good suggestion, and I think we are already doing it. Maybe explicitly expects a kind of instruction for the whole world, for the Catholic Church, and that could also be kind of guidelines. That's good to take it. The other point I wanted to say was that we have moved along from Ruth Madeline, and then this. I simply tried to simplify the complex issue, what she is trying to say. We cannot attach autonomy to dignity, and where does the dignity located? Where is the dignity? No, autonomy. Autonomy is not in the air. Autonomy is located in a human being who is inseparable from the dignity. So I think dignity precedes autonomy, and therefore that autonomy and informed consent being as the condition for dignity doesn't arise. The other way is right.
So thank you very much. We don't have time for any more comments. But I just want to say in the beginning we began with Immanuel Kant saying that because we are able to self-determine, we have worth and therefore we have dignity. We move on to that, we have broadened the horizons, we have gone to a global framework of UNESCO's principle where dignity is the source and it can be well evaluated, not giving emphasis to autonomy. And we have talked about public health, One Health, and world religions emphasizing that dignity is inalienable and inviolable. Thank you very much for this session. Thank you to the speakers for your interesting engagement with us. And I thank all the listeners and the participants. Have a good morning. Thank you very much.
Monsignor Renzo Pegoraro. And Reverend Dr. Charles Davis. We also have mementos for our chairpersons. And Dr. Bindu.